Good morning, boys and girls, and all of God's children. Welcome to the South District Church School neighborhood. Thank you for joining us. Our presiding elder is the Reverend Janet Jenkins Sturdivant of the South District of the Philadelphia Annual Conference. We thank you for joining us today. Our special word for today is wisdom. Wisdom. We all know what that means, don't we? It's about being smart and doing the right thing. When I shared the word wisdom with Buttercup, he gave me a wonderful example. He told me that his friend Archie invited him to go fishing with him on a Saturday morning. And Archie's dad said, if you're not ready at 6 o'clock in the morning, Buttercup, we're going to pull up in your driveway. If you're not ready, we're going to keep going. So Buttercup made a lot of wise decisions. When he got home from school that day, he didn't play video games. Instead, he did his homework. He cleaned his room. He took his shower the night before. And then before going to bed, he set his alarm so it would go off at 5:30 in the morning. So when 6 o'clock came, he was ready. Buttercup used a lot of wisdom, and it paid off. He had a great time. Patches gave me an example of wisdom as well. Patches has two grandfathers, and one of the grandfathers lives on a farm. And one day when he was visiting, the grandfather had a stand out to sell fruits and vegetables. Mostly it was cantaloupe and watermelon. And what happened is they were still setting up. A big bus comes down the road, but they only had like a few cantaloupe and watermelon on the table. So what happens is the Patches started to go and get one watermelon or two at a time, and then he remembered he had a red wagon in Grandpa's barn, and he went and got the wagon and he loaded up lots of cantaloupe and lots of watermelon, pulled it out to the stand, and the grandfather was so proud of Patches. He says, that was such a wise thing to do, Patches. So an excellent example of using wisdom. In today's lesson, we're going to be learning from 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28, and our topic is a just king. And the king that we're going to be learning about today is King Solomon. We remember King Solomon, don't we? He's the son of King David, and King Solomon was blessed to be able to build a temple for God. Did you know that King Solomon actually became king when he was only 14 years old? That he was able to take the throne at that age? Even though he had other brothers, his father, King David, chose him to be the king. And what we know about Solomon is that not very long after becoming king, God visited him in a dream. And God told Solomon that he could have what is it that you would want, Solomon? What is it that you would like from me? And you know what he asked for? He asked for wisdom. And God was so pleased that Solomon, even at a very young age, he knew that he wanted to be able to make good decisions for the people and to be able to make good decisions to discern between good and bad. And it's not very long after that he's tested. There's a situation, and this is what we're going to see in our lesson today, that there are two women, and they each have had babies, and one of the babies dies, and the lady whose baby died gets up at night and switches the baby. And so the next morning they go to the king. Let's hear how that story is. It's in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28, and I'm actually using our AME literature, our junior book. Later, two women came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house." Remember I said they both had babies? "Then on the third day after I gave birth, This woman also gave birth. We were together. There was no one else in the house. Only the two of us were in the house. Then this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your servant slept. She laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. While I rose in the morning to nurse my son, I saw that he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, clearly it was not my son. So that's the one lady telling the king what happened. Now let's hear what the other lady says. The other woman said, "No, the living son is mine, and the dead son is yours." The first lady said, "No, the dead son is yours, and the living son is mine." So they argued before the king. What's the king to do? Remember, Solomon has asked God for wisdom, how to discern. Then the king said, "The one says, 'This is my son that is alive, and your son is dead.' While the other says, 'Not so. Your son is dead, and my son is the living one.' So the king said, 'Bring me a sword.' And they brought a sword before the king. The king said, 'Divide the living boy in two, then give half to the one and half to the other.' But the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because compassion for her son burned within her, 'Please, my lord, give her the living boy. Certainly do not kill him.' The other woman said, 'It shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide him.' Then the king responded. So the kings watched. One of them says, 'Please don't. I don't care. Just give the baby to her.' And the other one says, 'Go ahead, divide them.' So the king, that tells the king who's the mother really is, right? Then the king responded, 'Give the first woman the living boy. Do not kill him. She is his mother.' All Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice." Do you see how King Solomon solved this? He said, "I'll say, let's have the baby killed and split in half." And he knew that the real mother would say, "Absolutely not, just let him live." And that's exactly what happened, where the one that wasn't the real mother was like, "Sure, just go ahead and do it." Solomon had asked for wisdom from God, and God had given it to him. And it made the people that are watching him, the people that are in that kingdom, they feel so wonderful that they have a wise king. Let's take a look at that memory verse again. And the memory verse is 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 28. All Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice. So as part of the kingdom, they want to make certain that their king has good judgment. And isn't that how we feel about our leaders? And shouldn't we pray for our leaders? That God, please bless the people that are in government positions. And we don't have kings, but we have presidents, we have senators and mayors and governors. And let them use wisdom as they are judging, as they are ruling. And let us also pray for our parents and thank God for the wisdom that he gives them as they do things to keep us safe and make life better for us. So we are so thankful for wisdom. Let's go over that memory verse together. All Israel heard of the judgment that the had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that was in him to execute justice. Are you able to fill that in with me? All Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice. They were very happy. I hope that you'll take the time to read more about King Solomon. And Solomon has written some of the books in our Bible. One of them is the book of Proverbs. In particular, if you take a look at Proverbs chapter 3, it talks about wisdom. I think we all know Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. That's written by King Solomon. But what's exciting is if you continue reading that chapter, listen to what else he says about wisdom. When we get down to verse 13, blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. Solomon has learned to appreciate the value of wisdom, and it means more than money. Having wisdom means so much more. And God granted Solomon wisdom, and then he also granted him all the other things. He was one of the most wealthy men that ever lived. We thank God for our lesson today, and we thank God for you. We hope that you'll join us on next week. Our lesson is, our topic is God Promises Justice. It's going to come from the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verses 1 through 2, verse 5, and then 12 through 13. So I trust that you'll read that during the week, and remember to read all of Proverbs 3. Until then, God bless you. Bye-bye.